Zuko and Katara. First, they were enemies, then they became close, then they became enemies again after Zuko betrayed Katara at the end of Season 2. Then they became close again. Katara was the one most hurt by Zuko's betrayal when he joined Azula at the end of Season 2, but that's because she was the first one to trust him. Katara is the last one to accept Zuko when he joins Team Avatar, but when she does finally believe in him again, they become very close. Zuko chooses Katara to help him against Azula. They save each other's lives. But what if their relationship had taken a turn for the romantic? This question has occupied the minds of Avatar fans for about a decade and a half now. When I was doing research for this episode, and by doing research I mean looking at tons of Zutara videos, I saw that many of these videos dated from back when the show was still running. Support for Zutara really picked up at the end of Season 2, when they were in prison together, and Katara offered to heal Zuko's scar, and the Zutara fandom really has not died down since. But I'm not here to talk about whether Zutara should have happened, although yes, it would have been fascinating on a character level and on a thematic level if it did. I'm here to talk about what would have happened if Zutara did occur. What ripple effects would it have had? As Katang is the central relationship in the show, pairing Katara with Zuko instead changes quite a lot. This is Avatar Explained, What If Zutara Happened? Firstly, let's talk about how it could have happened. There are two routes to this transpiring. The first is at the end of Season 2. If Aang and Iroh don't break into their prison to free them, Katara heals Zuko's scar. Possibly, they kiss. At this point, Katara has kissed Aang before, but only once, in episode 202, The Cave of the Two Lovers, and that was when both their lives were in peril. I'm not going to say this kiss doesn't count because of that fact, but Katara doesn't think of herself as being tied to him. If the inclination overtook her to kiss Zuko, she would not have stopped herself from doing so. Aside from Aang, the only other romantic relationship she is involved with throughout the course of the series is with Jet, and Zuko is a better version of Jet. Yes, I may be oversimplifying things, but Jet and Zuko are paralleled in the back half of Season 2, and Jet's failure to let go of his rage and bitterness is contrasted with Zuko's ability to, with the help of his uncle, overcome his worst tendencies. It's not unimaginable to think that Katara could kiss him here, and if she does so after healing his face, I don't think Zuko turns against Team Avatar at the end of the episode. To Zuko, his scar is the mark of the banished prince. He eventually grows to be alright with the scar, but for years it symbolized how he needed to reclaim his honor. If Katara heals his scar, think about what that means thematically. It means that he is not bound to his past anymore. He's not bound to his old goals and ambitions. The odds of him turning against her after this point are minuscule, and if he does side with Team Avatar against Azula, I highly doubt Zutara doesn't continue going forward. Aang, still being an immature kid, would likely try to break them up so he could be with Katara himself, but I don't see Katara breaking up with Zuko unless he betrays her. The second option for how Zutara could have happened is later on, after Zuko joins the group at the midpoint of Season 3, and more specifically, after he regains her trust at the end of the Southern Raiders. I've seen fan art of Katara kissing Zuko at the end of the Southern Raiders, but if I am going to be frank, that doesn't make any sense. Going from "thank you for helping me conquer this darkness inside myself and giving me a chance to confront the horrors of my past" to "I love you and I want to make out" is major tonal whiplash. Also, since there are only 5 more episodes after this point, I don't think there's much time for Zutara to blossom naturally by the end of the show. But imagine if Season 3 was longer. Imagine it were 30 episodes instead of 20. Imagine if Katara and Zuko got several more episodes together apart from the rest of the group. Is it that hard to imagine the two of them falling for each other? Of course, the problem with having Zuko and Katara get together in the endgame of Avatar: The Last Airbender is Aang. By the time Zuko and Katara are close again, Katara's relationship with Aang has advanced significantly. He kisses her again before he flies off to face Fire Lord Ozai, and he has a heated romantic dance with her in episode 302, The Headband. However, it is important to note that they are not officially together until the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender. In episode 317, The Ember Island Players, Aang complains about how the play put Zuko and Katara together, and a large reason why he's so discontent is that he's not romantically involved with Katara, even after kissing her multiple times. He's unsure as to the place he occupies in her heart. When he kisses her again, she breaks away and says she's confused. If the Zuko and Katara relationship had been given more time to develop, they might have been able to ignite a romantic spark. It's not entirely out of the question. Now that we have identified scenarios in which they do get together, it's time for the part of the video that's more interesting to me personally. What happens if they do? How does it affect them and those around them? The first question we have to ask ourselves is, do they stay together? Hardcore anti-Zutara shippers would say no. They say that Katara and Zuko would not have worked long-term. When Brian Konietzko and Mike Dante DiMartino, the co-creators of Avatar, are asked about Zutara, they tend to take this approach. But I would argue that this position is not supported by the show. Undoubtedly, Zuko and Katara would have problems if they got together. All couples do. But they understand every side of each other, and they trust each other completely. And these two things, understanding and trust, are, in my eyes, the most important things to sustaining a long-term relationship. Throughout the course of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang never really understands who Katara is and how she sees the world. He retains a simplistic and idealized picture of her. If Aang can stay married to Katara, I don't see why Zuko couldn't. Moving beyond that, let's talk about how this affects Aang. Obviously, he's going to be heartbroken for a while, but I don't think he spends the rest of his life swearing off love or pining after Katara. I have too much respect for Aang as a character to think that of him. His childhood crush fell in love with someone else. It happens. A lot of us have had to go through the exact same thing. Does that mean we abandon all hope of romantic love? Of course not. Additionally, even if Aang wanted to not have a romantic relationship with anyone but Katara, he doesn't have that luxury. As the subtitle of the show suggests, he is the last airbender. If he doesn't want airbenders to become extinct, he needs to have children. In fact, I wonder if he and Katara would have had 3 kids if this wasn't the case. Taking care of 1 kid is hard enough work. Taking care of 3 is a struggle, especially when the parents can't be there for their kids as often as they ought to be because of their professional responsibilities. Aang is the hero of the world. He ended the 100-Year War and defeated the Fire Lord. Now his help is needed to build a new world, and that takes a lot of time and energy. It is not an easy and straightforward process. Yes, the world needs Katara, but it needs Aang more, because he's the Avatar. Thus, much of the burden for raising the kids falls on Katara, and because she has to take care of 3 of them, she doesn't have a lot of time to chart her own course and write her own story. Would this also have been the case if Aang and Katara only had 1 or 2 kids? Maybe, but it would have been less of a burden on Katara. But that was never an option. They sort of had to keep having children until they had Tenzin, an airbender, so I'm going to go ahead and say that Zuko and Katara have only 1 or 2 kids, giving them both more free time. Aang, however, still probably has 3 or more kids, and the woman who ends up his wife likely has to raise them mostly by herself. Who does Aang marry? It's a legitimate question, but I sadly don't think I can provide a satisfying answer. It's probably not a major character. I don't see him getting together with Toph or anything like that. However, it's likely he ends up with one of the Air Acolytes, a group we see in Korra, which, as presented in the comics, evolves out of an Avatar Aang fan club. It's not a stretch to say that there are more than a few acolytes who would love to get to know Aang in a romantic way. Possibly he returns the affection of this acolyte. Also possibly he doesn't love her as much as she loves him, but he knows he needs to get married and have kids. But enough of Aang, this isn't about him, it's about Katara and Zuko. Zuko likely lives to an old age, just like he does in the original timeline. I don't see why his lifespan would be shorter just because he married Katara. This means they get to grow old together, as opposed to in the original timeline, wherein Katara lives on for decades after Aang dies. But let's talk about what their getting together means for the Fire Nation. This I find fascinating. Ever since the time of Fire Lord Sozin, Zuko's great-grandfather, the Fire Nation has waged a war of conquest on the world, justified by a belief in their ethnic supremacy. Sozin may have said that he wanted to share the Fire Nation's greatness with the rest of the world, but even if he was honest and sincere in that belief, those who followed him were not. The extent of this supremacist ideology can be seen multiple times throughout Avatar: The Last Airbender. Look at episode 106, Imprisoned, in which the warden that imprisons the earthbenders in the rig dismisses earthbending itself as savagery. Or think about the speech Zhao gives to his forces after he has captured the Avatar in episode 113, the Blue Spirit. He literally calls fire the superior element. We already know from the comics that the transition from a world in which the four nations were distinct and separate to the multicultural world we see in The Legend of Korra was a fraught one. The strict division of the four elements was supported even by those who are otherwise framed quite positively, such as Avatar Roku, whom Aang upsets by deciding not to force average Fire Nation citizens out of the former Fire Nation colonies. So imagine the reaction if Zuko, who is already facing charges of treason from those who prefer the more militaristic Ozai regime, married Katara, a peasant from the Southern Water Tribe, which the Fire Nation has spent a century raiding. May not be a firebender, but she is a Fire Nation citizen from a prestigious family. Katara is something else entirely. To put this in easy-to-understand terms, imagine a world in which, after Hitler died, his immediate successor was married to a Jewish woman. That's what we're dealing with here. If Zutara happens, Zuko likely has an even harder time staying in power than he does in the original timeline. It would enhance the perception among loyalists to the Ozai regime that Zuko does not have the Fire Nation's best interests at heart. Nevertheless, I see Zuko staying in power. The Fire Nation is too disorganized in the aftermath of Ozai's defeat to be able to return him to the throne. As long as Zuko doesn't take any unnecessary risks, I don't see him getting assassinated. Assuming Zuko resigns from his post and travels the world to basically become a temporary avatar after Aang dies, as he does in the original timeline, the oldest of Zuko and Katara's children is the Fire Lord by the events of The Legend of Korra. Interestingly, it's possible this child could be a waterbender. This would be quite a change from the centuries spent promoting the ethnic supremacy of firebenders and the Fire Nation. Zutara happening would be a symbol of the push toward multiculturalism we see take place between the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender and the start of The Legend of Korra. That doesn't mean there's no difference between the four nations, an idea Aang expresses intense disgust for in the comics. This is because he wants to maintain a separate airbending culture. But what this does mean is that the four nations are not as distinct and different as they are in Avatar: The Last Airbender. And that's without talking about the United Republic. Iroh, considered by both the characters and the fandom to be the wisest character in Avatar, talks about how it is important to draw knowledge from all four nations, and the United Republic is the living embodiment of that ideal. Yes, Aang and Katara getting married is also a case of the union of people from two different nations, but because Aang is the Avatar, and the Avatar's authority is above the level of the nations, the impact is somewhat muted. Zuko, the new leader of the nation that has been most affected by notions of cultural supremacy, Mary Katara, is a much clearer indication of the multicultural direction the world is heading toward. Hopefully, in this scenario, Katara receives more respect than she does in the original timeline. Think about how important Katara is to the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The show literally does not happen without her, as her breaking Aang out of the iceberg is the inciting event from which everything else comes. When the group is in danger of falling apart, she keeps them together. This is most apparent in episode 211, The Desert. Aang is too distraught over the loss of Appa to think clearly. Sokka and Momo are both tripping on cactus juice. Toph can't see because the sand is not firm and that messes with her feet vision. But Katara stops them from dying out there. Or think about how, at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Katara's right there with Zuko as he defeats Azula and becomes the new Fire Lord. But she's the only main member of Team Avatar, of whom we do not see a statue in The Legend of Korra. While the other members of Team Avatar go on to long and fruitful careers, with Toph becoming Republic City's first chief of police, and Sokka entering into politics and becoming a councilman, Katara seems to have mostly disappeared from the historical record. When people think of her by the time of Korra, it's mostly as Aang's wife and the mother of his children. Now, this is not Aang's fault, but Katara deserves better. She really does. And hopefully, in this alternate timeline, she gets what she deserves. Having fewer kids, she likely has to spend less time raising them, and can thus spend more time making history. So thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, and comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to support the channel, and see more videos like this. Keep watching Avatar, it's a fantastic show, with so many interesting possibilities that I love to explore here. Tune in soon for the next Avatar Explained video. It will certainly be coming soon. Thanks again. Adios, comrades.